On today's show, there was a rarity with the Cavs on Tuesday. I'll tell you what that is, plus what we need to see from the Cavs before the regular season ends. And I've got one more goal for this team to hit before the postseason arrives. We'll talk about all that and so much more on today's edition of Locked On Cavs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? My name is Danny Cunningham. You might know me from my time covering the Cleveland Cavaliers, places like my Substack, The Inside Shot, Cleveland Magazine, 92.3 The Fan, and a number of other stops along the way. I want to say thank you to you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. You can find the show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Drop us a 5-star rating. Leave us a nice review. Be a friend. Tell a friend about Locked On Cavs. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure a friend is subscribed as well. And if you're watching the show on YouTube, do me a favor. Hit that thumbs up button for me. Click subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content. A proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On Tuesday, the Cavs did something they've not done for a long time. They had a practice. Yes. An NBA team went a really long time without having a practice. This was the first full practice the Cavs have had in quite some time. They were going to have a practice. Kenny Atkinson talked about it earlier in the month of March, and they decided to play horse instead. And then they went out and had a really nice win that night or that next day against Utah. They were going to have a practice in Nashville before playing Memphis, and they had a flag football game instead. The last time the Cavs had a practice, a full, real NBA practice at home, so at Cleveland Clinic Courts in Independence at the team's practice facility, was February 9th. It is 10:41 p.m. on April 1st, as I say this. This is not an April Fool's joke. The Cavs went 50 days between having real practices. That is an absurd amount of time in the NBA, but this is because of what the schedule has been. They've been a team that has prioritized rest over practice, which I do think is the proper way to do things, especially when this is a group with championship expectations. If this was a team in a different position where maybe they were fighting to make the playoffs, or maybe they were a young team focused on, being more developmental than they are right now, I think this would be a really bad thing. But because they're a team that is focusing on winning a title, I think this is probably the way that the Cavs should have approached this stretch of the season. That doesn't mean it's perfect, because I don't think it has been perfect. And I think that the Cavs would tell you that. And I do think that we have seen some slippage from this team at times. And I do think that not practicing is part of that. I also think that fatigue is part of that. But the fact that they haven't had time to practice, to have a full, real practice since February 9th, is something that matters. When you talk about this team sliding a little bit, not playing their best basketball, I think that is something that factors into it. It's not the whole thing. It's not everything, but it's part of the equation. And I just think that's something that probably needs to be remembered. And I have talked about the fatigue aspect of this, and maybe not the practice angle so much, but I do think that we are going to see a team that is going to start playing much better basketball and start gearing up for the postseason now. And that's really the sense I got from walking out of the practice facility on Tuesday afternoon. So I did attend, the media availability following practice. And the first thing that stood out to me, and we spoke with Kenny Atkinson, we spoke with Donovan Mitchell, we spoke with Isaac Okoro. And the thing that stood out to me, particularly when speaking with Donovan, is that I got the sense that he feels refreshed, like that he feels in a better place physically and mentally than he's been at this point in previous seasons. And I do think part of that is the fact that he's played fewer minutes. I think part of that is where the Cavs are at in the standings. Like, this is not a group, and I know the 1 seed is not technically locked up. Their magic number is 4. I want to talk about that later on in the show today. They are not necessarily playing for anything other than to try and play their best basketball to close out the regular season. I don't know exactly what that is going to look like, but they're not playing for seeding. I don't think that the best overall record, the number 1 overall seed in the NBA, is something that ever mattered to them. And I do think the top seed in the East matters to them, but if they follow their goal, and Kenny Atkinson mentioned this on Sunday, I believe it was, if their goal is to be in good shape going into the postseason where they're playing good basketball and they're all healthy, they'll win 4 of their final 7 games. And that magic number will take care of itself. They don't have to rely on Boston. Now, it's something that you would think should happen regardless. And I do think will happen regardless. And I will talk about that later in the show. But I do think that they care more about how they're playing than any seeding. And I think that lends it to being a little bit less taxing mentally. Like, I don't think anyone on this roster or on the coaching staff is waking up every single day and opening their NBA app the first thing in the morning to check the standings. I think they know where they stand, but I don't think it's this huge stressor. And I think if the Cavs were in a different position, things might feel a little bit more stressful right now than they do. And I think that's a huge benefit to the Cavs. And I think that we're going to see a fresher, more refreshed, probably is the best way to say it, version of this team throughout the final 2 weeks, week and a half, 10 days, however long you want to say the rest of the season is at this point. I think that is something that it's worth mentioning. It's something that I noticed talking to Donovan, talking to Kenny, talking to Isaac. Like, they just seem like they're in. I really think that having 2 days without a game. So Monday, and Kenny said that they did some walkthrough stuff and some film work on Monday, didn't have a real practice, but they did some stuff. And then having a real practice on Tuesday, but not having a game either of those days, I think is really beneficial for them. I think they think it's really beneficial. I think these have been dates that have been circled on the calendar for a while. The last time the Cavs had 2 days off at home where they didn't have to travel into it was January 31st and February 1st. It's a long time ago. It's a really, really long time ago. They've had 2 days off a couple times since then, but travel has always been part of it. So I think that we are now going to see a rested, refreshed team. The other thing that was a big focus at practice on Tuesday was the rebounding side of things. And the rebounding was not good for the Cavs in the month of March. I think there are probably a few different things that factor into that. I think the lineups are some of those things. I think the fact that they were tired near the end of the month factors into that as well. But it's one of the things I did ask Donovan Mitchell about, because for him to go out and have 11 rebounds against the Clippers on Sunday, I looked at that as not just him doing what was best for the team that day, but sort of making a statement that they're not going to accept who they had been as a rebounding team. So he basically said it has to be a mentality thing and it has to be more of a team effort. And it's not one thing. And I thought that he put this in a way I hadn't necessarily thought about. And I've not been somebody that has always wanted to blame the bigs for not getting it done. Like, I really do think that rebounding is a team-wide thing. And he made a good comparison. Like, if he were an opposing big, and obviously he's not, but if he were an opposing big, he would do everything he can to just make sure that Jared Allen and Evan Mobley don't get the rebound. It's not necessarily even the opposing big getting the rebound. It's trying to allow the teammates of that opposing big to get the rebound. And that means it has to be more of an emphasis for guys like Donovan, like Darius, like Max Strus, Dean Wade, guys that aren't necessarily your traditional bigs, making it about being a team rebounding thing. DeAndre Hunter is certainly part of this, and we will talk about this coming up a little bit. But entering the month of March, so from October through the end of February, the Cavs were 9th in rebounding, which maybe you could make the case is a little underachieving considering they play two bigs so often. I think it's probably about right, just because the rest of the roster doesn't necessarily lend itself to being a great rebounding team. The guards are not necessarily what you would, I mean, no one would call them big guards, certainly. And Darius, I think, is a small guard, and Donovan probably qualifies as such as well with his height, although I think he's got the wingspan and the athleticism to make up for it. But 9th kind of feels about right. In the month of March, the Cavs were 22nd in rebounding rate. That is not championship level basketball. I do not think that you can win a championship rebounding the basketball that way. Now, I do think that there are some circumstances that led to that. I think part of it is roster construction, and this is something that does need to improve, but I don't think that is just who the Cavs are. Like, I just don't think that they're not going to be a good rebounding team. I think that fatigue led into that. I think the amount of zone they've played leads into that too, because I do think that the defensive rebounding is a challenge for them when they're in that zone, because there are times where, Max Strus will be tasked with trying to box out an opposing team's big guy. And that's asking way too much of Max Strus. That's not Max's fault. He's in the position. And if that big's going to get a rebound over him, like, what do you expect Max to do? It's not a fair ask. And I think sometimes guys are being put in just unfair positions. And I think that is part of that battle. And it's not as if the Cavs have been a great defensive rebounding team, but in terms of defensive rebounding percentage, the Cavs were 26th in the NBA out of 30 teams in March. It was really, really bad. I think that is the easiest thing to look at on that end of the floor and just say, if you fix that, the Cavs are an elite defense again, because I don't think that the Cavs defense has been bad. I don't think they've finished possessions well enough. They have not been good enough rebounding the basketball. And if they just limit second chance opportunities, I think their defense looks a lot better than it did. How often did we watch this team and say, the defense isn't bad. It's just when other teams get 3 tries on a possession to score in the NBA, more often than not, they're going to find a way to get points. And I think that had been happening just a little bit too frequently for this Cleveland team in the month of March. But there are 7 games left. What exactly do we need to see from the Cavs before the end of the regular season? I've got some lineup data that I want to talk about because there's some very interesting stuff. And yes, the rebounding stuff will be important. We'll talk about that next right here on Locked On Cavs. Today's show is brought to you by Prize Picks. Baseball season in full swing, and there's no better way to get in on the action than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With Prize Picks, you pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash, whether it's strikeouts, RBIs, first inning runs. Prize Picks keeps every game exciting. Maybe this week with, the advent of the torpedo bats, right? That's a thing now. Aaron Judge, more than 1 home run, seems like a pretty smart pick if you ask me. And maybe out west, you think Shohei Ohtani is getting more than 1 stolen base. It can be that easy over at Prize Picks. Setting a lineup takes less than 60 seconds. And when you win, your payout is quick, safe, and secure. So download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA, that is LOCKEDON NBA, to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNBA for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. Like I said earlier, you can find the podcast anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Make sure you drop us a 5-star rating and tell a friend about Locked On Cavs. The playoffs are close. You've got Locked On Cavs. I want your friends, your Cavs fans' friends, to have Locked On Cavs. Make sure you tell them about it as well. Make sure you also check out the Locked On Cavs daily newsletter, your one stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. You can sign up for free right now at lockedondaily.com. That is lockedondaily.com. So 7 games remaining, beginning tonight against the New York Knicks. This is the second game of a back-to-back for New York. I do not know at this time who's going to be available. I cannot imagine Jalen Brunson going to play in this game. Karl Anthony Towns did not play in New York's Tuesday night win over Philadelphia. So we'll see if he plays on Wednesday in Cleveland. Obviously, we don't know that. But what do we need to see from the Cavs in these final 7 games of the regular season? And the one thing that was part of what Kenny Atkinson talked about at practice on Tuesday was the lineup experimentation. And Jackson Flickinger of Fear the Sword is the one that asked this question. And it was about DeAndre Hunter with the rest of the starters. And when that trade was made, I think that there was an assumption that ultimately Hunter at some point would be in the starting lineup. And Kenny Atkinson did not close the door on that. In fact, he kind of did the opposite, where basically saying when the playoffs arrive, anything goes. Like, any changes that need to be made in the playoffs will be made in the playoffs. They love Max with the starting 5, but there could, and I think ultimately there will come a time in the postseason when DeAndre Hunter is going to need to be a starter. I think they'll get there. But I do think it's important, and Kenny talked about this, I think it's important to see more of him with the rest of the starting 5 in the final 7 games. So to this point, DeAndre Hunter has played roughly 30 minutes with the core four. So that would, of course, be Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, Evan Mobley, and Jarrett Allen. Those 30 minutes have gone very well for the Cavs. They've outscored opponents in those 30 minutes, but it's just a very, very small sample size. Since he joined, he's only played 56 possessions, according to Cleaning the Glass, alongside of that core four. And that factors out garbage time. Now, in that time, Cavs have outscored opponents, have a net rating of 32 in 56 possessions. So that's really, really good. It's just such a small sample size that I don't want to say it's not worth looking at, but I think you can kind of overrate the results with a sample size that small. It's not as if that is played out for 1,000 possessions, is it still plus 32? Probably not. But it's worth looking into. It's worth doing more of. And I think that is one of the things that we need to see. I'm not saying that DeAndre Hunter needs to start games down the stretch. I do think that would be the easiest way to get a look at him with that group. But I do think that there need to be games where when the Cavs are closing out the first half or closing out the fourth quarter, or, maybe in potential blowout wins earlier in the fourth quarter, I do think it's important for Kenny to get eyes on that a little bit more. I think that having that, and that has played 30 minutes across 7 games. So when it has played together, it hasn't been for long stretches at a time. I think the longest stretch that group played together came in actually DeAndre Hunter's first game against Minnesota, because that was the game that Max Strus did not play. Hunter was in the starting lineup. In, of course, the last game that Max Strus did not play, DeAndre Hunter did not start. And those are things that are just worth thinking about as we go through this. But I think that getting him more minutes, more possessions, just growing that sample size, that is something that should be important to Kenny Atkinson. It should be important to the Cavs, because at some point, I don't know if it's going to be in the first round. I kind of doubt it. Maybe the second round, certainly the conference finals against the Boston Celtics, if both teams get that far. The Cavs are going to need that lineup. They're going to need that lineup. And having that lineup together a little bit more frequently in the regular season, I don't see how there could be any harm from that. Could opponents maybe see it a little bit more? Sure. But at a certain point, you are who you are, and it's about execution. And I don't want to sit here and say, oh, scouting doesn't mean anything, because that's just not true. But when you get to the conference finals, you know everything there's to know about an opponent. You know tendencies, you know lineups, you know plays, you know how they're going to defend. It's, can you out execute your opponent? And I think that the more practice executing that the Cavs have with that group of 5 players together is something that is worth doing. And the other thing with DeAndre Hunter, while we're here, is I think that he should play a little bit more small forward moving forward. It's not that he's been bad at power forward. He hasn't been. The Cavs are plus 9.9 per 100 possessions when DeAndre Hunter plays power forward. That's a bigger sample size than him playing small forward. But when he plays small forward, they're plus 12.4. And part of that is with the starting lineup. Part of that is, with only one of Darius or Donovan, but obviously that is with both Jarrett and Evan for the most part. I do think that there's a lineup that I wouldn't mind seeing, which is Evan Mobley at center, Dean Wade at power forward, and DeAndre Hunter at small forward. That lineup has not played a ton. It's played a little bit, but there's not a big enough sample size to really pull that data and cite it, just because it's so small. So I think that those are things. And the Cavs, to get back to the rebounding aspect of things, the Cavs are not a great rebounding team when DeAndre Hunter's at the 4. They're a better rebounding team when DeAndre Hunter's at the 3. DeAndre is not the best rebounder, but adding that size there, I do think helps them. If he can be your 3rd best rebounder, you're in a much better position, I think, than if he is your 2nd best rebounder. And then the other thing that I do think would be good to see from the Cavs is a couple of blowout wins. I don't want to sit here and say, the Cavs haven't blown anybody out. They haven't looked good lately, because that just wouldn't necessarily be true. Like, they had the blowout win over the Jazz. I think you could maybe call the win against Portland a blowout. Against the Clippers, they won that game by more than the final score. Like, I just don't think that was necessarily, they were up so big in the fourth quarter. And yeah, they took their foot off the gas, But I think that the Cavs have a real opportunity, and it starts tonight against New York. The Cavs have owned the Knicks this year. They've played twice. Cavs have won both games. They won the last game by 40 plus. New York on a second night of a back-to-back. Don't have Jalen Brunson. I think tonight's game is a game that they should win big. Like, this should be a 25-point victory. And I think that starting to see this team round into what should be its playoff form is something that would be a good thing to see from them before the postseason arrives. That is something that I do think is important, and they have the opportunity to do this. As I said earlier, tonight's game, it's the second game of a back-to-back for New York. Karl Towns didn't play last night. Jalen Brunson, I don't believe, going to play tonight. I don't know if Karl's going to play tonight or not. But this is something that the Cavs have a rest advantage over a team for the first time in a while. The last time they had 2 days off, they looked awesome in that next game, which was the win in Memphis, which, again, that final score was not nearly as close as what the game actually was. They should look good tonight. And I think that would be a really good start to what the postseason should be. Now, I have one more goal for the Cavs to take care of before the regular season ends. I think it's a very attainable one. I'll tell you what that is next, right here on Locked On Cavs. Today's show is brought to you by Monarch Money. You ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, it can be easy to lose track of that cash. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money, not just a budgeting app, it is a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending right in one place. So you just stop managing your money. You start building that wealth. It's what we want to do. We want to build that wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan for some of those long-term goals that I know you have. And managing money with your partner can be smoother than ever because you can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without all of the stress. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA, that is LOCKEDONNBA, at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. Thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. If you're watching the show on YouTube, do me a favor, hit that thumbs up button for me, click subscribe, hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content. I think there is one more goal the Cavs should have this regular season, and that goal is to take care of business. There are 7 games left before the postseason begins. They have a magic number of 4 to clinch the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. Their next 4 opponents beginning tonight are the New York Knicks, the San Antonio Spurs, the Sacramento Kings, and the Chicago Bulls. The Cavs should win all 4 of those games. They will be heavy favorites in all 4 of those games. As I record this, there's not a point spread out for Wednesday night against the Knicks. I would imagine the Cavs are going to be favored by 10 points. I would imagine on Friday in San Antonio, the Cavs are going to be favored by 10 points or more. I would imagine on Sunday at home against the Sacramento Kings, Cavs are going to be favored by 10 points or more. I would imagine when they play the Bulls, I believe next Tuesday at home, they're going to be favored by 10 points or more. The Cavs should take care of business in these 4 games. After that, they have a game with Indiana, and Indiana is going to be playing for something. They have a game with New York the following day in New York. The Knicks might still be playing for something, probably going to be locked into 3 by that point. I don't think that those games are going to matter. I think that the Cavs will take care of business, but I think their last goal, their last challenge for the end of the regular season should be to win these next 4 games. And then whatever happens in the final 3 games after that happens and won't necessarily matter because they're not going to finish with the best record in basketball. If they want to try and win their final 7 games to set the franchise record for wins in a season, go for it. I don't think they care about that. I don't think that's part of the goal. But ultimately, I think that they should win these next 4 games. I think that should be the challenge, is to, yes, still take things day by day, take things 1 game at a time, but they should take care of business in these next 4 games. And that should be the thing that is kind of the last remaining goal, is to try and have home court in the East locked up before the game in Indiana next Thursday night. I think that's a very fair goal. I think that's a reasonable goal. I think it's a goal that's likely to happen, but I think it should be the goal. I think that these are the 4 games and they are all against opponents. I mean, the Knicks are not a bad opponent, but given the rest advantage the Cavs have had and the health advantage they have, none of these 4 opponents are anywhere near the level of the Cavs. They have consistently, except for basically 2 weeks in this season, they have consistently beaten the teams that they are better than all season long. That shouldn't change now. And I do think that after having a couple of days off, after having a practice, after having an opportunity to refresh and refocus and maybe start rebounding for the rest of the regular season, I think this is something that's very achievable and something that should happen. But thank you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. You can find the show anywhere you get your podcast, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Drop us a 5-star rating. Leave us a nice review and be a friend. Tell a friend about Locked On Cavs. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure a friend is subscribed as well. And if you're watching the show on YouTube, before we get out of here, do me a favor. Hit that thumbs up button for me. Click subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content. I will be back tomorrow talking about the Cavs taking on the New York Knicks.